Greetings, YouTube, and welcome to the Witching Hour. I'm your host, Wolfman Dan, and if you give me 1 minute to get this stuff set up the way I do it over here on the Witching Hour, when I show you these really cool live streams, takes me a second to get things set up, and we always rock in to give people a chance to get in with a theme song. And today we got my man Pat McCormick with an appropriate theme. Lost in Space. And I use that to judge how good it's gonna look on my little camera. Moxley! You gotta come in the chat tonight and talk some wrestling for us? Let us know what's going on in the wrestling world. Oh man, really? Hey, y'all enjoying that jam, man? We're bringing it in with the Lost in Space theme by my man Pat McCormick. I want to welcome in my friend Mox. He's going to keep us all caught up with all the latest wrestling news in the chat. Hey, Mox, it's good to see you, brother. Yeah, I want to welcome everybody in. I'm going to play one more song, one more theme song from an old TV show, and then we're going to kick it off. I'm going to show some really cool old episodes of In Search of with Leonard Nimoy when a few more people actually get into the chat. Uncle Bones. Goddamn, we can start now. Greetings and welcome to the Witching Hour. I'm your host, the Wolfman Dan, Daily Dan. I want to welcome my friend Uncle Bones to the chat. And since Uncle Bones done showed up, I know it must be time for me to start this motherfucking show. To get time to get it on. So we're going to have a In Search of Marathon tonight. Featuring aliens, UFOs, and flying saucers.
Earth, the third planet of the sun. For uncounted thousands of years, men looked at the sky and wondered if they were alone.
Belly Dan bust.
There were machines that could travel into space. Men walked on the moon, but found no sign there of other intelligence. But there are 8 other planets moving around the same sun that kindled life on Earth.
Damn.
Could it have happened only on our planet? A spark that evolved into intelligence. The winter of 1976 would see another great step in search of life on other worlds.
I always start the show with a good bust when I'm smoking this good green from Colorado. Oh my God. I'm Dr. Wu tonight.
The planet nearest Earth glows redly in the night sky. What common heritage might these two worlds have?
This series presents information based in part on theory and conjecture. The producer's purpose is to suggest some possible explanation, but not necessarily the only ones, to the mysteries we will examine.
The first sunrise of mankind occurred more than 3 million years ago. Long before there were men, the sun was an insignificant cluster of distant gas. It wasn't long in the scheme of things before the gas and dust began to boil. Mass becoming energy, energy becoming mass. Other forces were at work as pressures built, and the infant sun was at war with itself. Nuclear fusion, the same force at work in the hydrogen bomb, created the sun and has fueled it through the millennium. In the convulsion of birth, great mass and enormous energy must have been thrown off into space. The planets were the cinders left by this cosmic holocaust. The same process was at work throughout the universe. Uncounted stars, uncounted planets, uncounted possibilities for life.
For life.
Probes have been sent into space, and new mathematics invented to help understand the dynamics of the universe. Most of what is known about space has been learned only in the latter half of this century. It would be arrogant to suppose, therefore, that we've done more than begin to ask the right questions. Of course, there's never been a shortage of answers. Before men had space probes and computers, they had imaginations. Georges Méliès was a pioneering filmmaker. In the first quarter of a century that would see men actually walk on the moon, he created a vision of that event might be like. Essential to Millet's comic view of a landing on the moon was an encounter with aliens. Such encounters have been dreamed of with mingled fear and hope for a long time. Ironically, Millet's view of the return to Earth was not unlike a modern Apollo splashdown and recovery. Percival Lowell was one of many who contemplated the possibilities of life on other worlds. He was not a filmmaker, but a man of science. Lowell's passion was something he saw on the face of Mars. Lowell came to Flagstaff, Arizona in 1894 to build an observatory. He hoped that the clear desert air would afford him a better look at Mars than any astronomer before him had been able to achieve. The 24-inch refracting telescope Lowell installed on the site was the most advanced of the day. When all was ready, Lowell trained his eye on Mars. The conclusions he reached about what he saw made him one of the most controversial scientists of the age. Arizona newspaperman George Hoyt has written a definitive biography of Percival Lowell. His research focused on Lowell's fascination with Mars and with the remarkable conclusions he made after long study.
Percival Lowell thought that there was intelligent life of some form on Mars. He deduced this logically from the existence of what he thought were canals on Mars, lines that he could see in the telescope that were highly geometrical, and he couldn't explain them in any other way except to assume that some intelligent beings had constructed these lines.
Lowell's observatory is still in use today. Its creator died in 1916, having fired the imaginations of many and tasted the ridicule of others. Later research indicates that Lowell's canals were illusions, but the remarkable events of 1976 have proven the astronomer right on many of his other observations.
He thought that Mars was in what he called the terrestrial stage of planetary evolution, and that was the stage after the one that the Earth was in, which was the terraqueous stage. In short, the Earth had oceans. Mars, he thought, had already lost its oceans, but it did have oceans at one time. Mars was drying up. Mars was desiccating, and he coined the word desertism for what was happening to Mars, and he thought that it was also just beginning to appear on Earth.
Lowell's observation about Earth's changing climate was profound. The forces at work in the solar system have a rhythm and a reason beyond the grasp of most men. Changes that are imperceptible from man's tiny window on the universe can have profound consequences. Lowell believed that some small shift in the orbit of Mars, or some fluctuation in the sun's rays, had gradually deprived Mars of life-giving water. He saw indications that the same processes were at work on Earth. Could it be that some Martian scientist was able to warn his people in time? At the Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Pasadena, California, scientists like Harold Klein are studying the similarities between Earth and Mars that Percival Lowell was the first to recognize.
Well, it's very difficult to talk about the evolution of a planet like Mars without too much information. The general theory at present is that both Mars and the Earth were formed at the same time about 5 billion years ago. One would then postulate that at the beginning, when the solar system was created, Mars had a much denser atmosphere than it has now, and that in many ways it was much more similar to the Earth, and perhaps, therefore, was conducive to the origin of life on that planet, as we believe was the case on this planet.
Water would have been essential if life on Mars was to develop as we know it. Gerald Soffen is a Mars geologist. The important thing to understand is that both planets were at one time hydrological planets. They were planets that had flooded amounts of water, and that water, that simple molecule, dominated for a great period of time the history of the planet. Now, there's no water on Mars today. There's no flooding water. There's certainly atmospheric water, and we now know the poles of Mars are water. So somewhere along the way, Mars went one way, and the Earth went the other way. What effect might the radical change in the Martian environment have had on life there? We're asking the question, if there is life on Mars, was it a separate event from the evolution of life on Earth? It's entirely possible that what we find on Mars, possible, not likely, is so close to our own that we've discovered, in a sense, the same event, the terrestrial life and the Earth life, because we're related to the same event that took place some time ago. Some time ago, indeed. And the question remains, could the birth of the sun some 5 billion years ago have given life to two worlds instead of one? Mission Control, the Jet Propulsion Laboratory in the foothills above Pasadena, California. It is from here that an ambitious undertaking in space will be directed. The target is Mars, 212 million miles from Earth. Men have walked on the moon, but this journey to Mars will take 11 months. Too long for man now, but not for his machines. Copy, Victor.
Amplitude orders in for 215602.
Copy, Victor. The Centaur lifts off from Cape Kennedy. It is August 20th, 1975. In the nose cone is a machine of ingenious artifice. It is called Viking. Men have learned to extend their intelligence beyond the confines of their fragile bodies, into icy space and onto unknown worlds. The machine will go where men cannot, for the present, go. It will obey the commands of the scientists in Pasadena, sitting at their computers 35 miles from the surfing beach at Malibu.
Roger, 211350, exactly on 3 and 4 out of luck.
The voyage itself is largely uneventful. Soon, however, the command center at Pasadena will be alive with activity.
Art, looking at I got the sheet here with me for the ranging for today. Okay. First range, 8.27.089. Okay, how did the correlation go?
10 months from liftoff, Viking 1 enters the orbit of Mars. An instrument package descends to the surface and awaits instructions from Earth.
Contact.
Now, we chose Mars primarily because Mars is, I guess you would call Mars our true sister planet to Earth. The biology that we know in the universe is focused mostly on the Earth. That's the only life that we know. Our life, we terrestrial beings, we the trees, and we the people. And our candidate for a search began with Mars.
8.27.089.
The first Viking lander is joined by a second 6 weeks later. With infrared sensors and special television cameras, men get their first close look at Mars.
9-7, second power. Calibrate out the effects of the solar corona.
Soil samples yield particularly fascinating results.
The data from both landers can be interpreted as being due to living organisms, can also be interpreted from what we now know as being due to some kind of very active surface chemistry going on the planet.
In Pasadena, a mock-up of the Viking lander is used to rehearse every move the real lander would be required to make. The dexterity of the lander is amazing. Sighting through television eyes, programmers on Earth trigger Viking to scoop up samples of soil or rock. Samples are dropped into a sifting mechanism that sorts particles for specific tests. Dr. Leslie Orgel points out that the tests are inconclusive.
The experiments that we've done with the Viking on Mars this time doesn't give any evidence at all for any compounds left over from life in the past on Mars. But that doesn't, of course, mean at all that there wasn't any life on Mars. There may have been compounds there, and they may have been destroyed.
Well, if you want to postulate a technological civilization on Mars, which has died out, you would then also have to have some mechanism to cover over any sort of buildings or any sort of vast project. It is conceivable that you might have had such a civilization which then got covered up by some cataclysmic event such as a massive Marsquake which completely covered over everything, and then all the artifacts of your ancient civilization are unburied in some way. None of this is visible, you see, from our pictures now that we're taking from the Viking spacecraft, which could see objects as small as about 15 yards or so, or bigger in size.
The Viking scientists believe that the Martian sky must have once resembled our own. Whether some natural catastrophe obliterated an ancient Mars civilization, we don't know. It seems, however, that Earth is not immune to the same forces that made Mars a desert. There are three schools of thought. Some believe a slight tilt in the Earth's axis is bringing on a new ice age. Others feel the Earth's climate is drying, and the deserts are slowly encroaching on population centers. Another view is that men have so altered the natural environment, no one can predict the future. Tons of pollution pour into the air from the great cities of Earth. The problem has been only recently recognized, and the effects of man's tampering can only be guessed at. Men have done worse things than pour smoke into the sky. It is possible that all of Earth may one day resemble the Southwest American desert. Mars looked much like this to the electronic eyes of Viking. The machines scanned the horizon and recorded no sign of intelligent life. It is unlikely that life evolving elsewhere in the universe would follow the same path as life on Earth. If that were to happen, however, Mars would seem to be the likely host. Two worlds have much in common, even now. Perhaps Viking didn't see all there was to see. Beyond that, could men recognize the works of a civilization radically different from his own? If there were Martians, and they knew what was happening to their planet, perhaps they chose to abandon it. On Earth, men have developed the technology to create orbiting habitats. Theoretically, these artificial worlds could be built on an immense scale in weightless space. They could provide a safe refuge for long voyages in space, voyages to new worlds. It is not inconceivable that Earth once held the same promise and fascination for Martians that the red planet now holds for mankind. Viking may be a step in the return voyage.
Greetings, Sarah.
This is the beginning. This is really truly the beginning. Regardless of what happens next year or even a decade from now, we have started what will become an adventure of mankind in searching for not only the lowly forms of life, but eventually, I think, to search for intelligent life. This is one of the milestones in the course of human destiny to find cousins. It is the inevitable path of man's destiny that he will explore the heavens. We're only now talking about the timetable. We'll adapt the environment to ourselves. We will change the atmosphere. We'll do what is called planetary engineering. It doesn't exist yet, but it will someday. For example, with all that water at the pole of Mars, there's no point in leaving it frozen there. But we might as well melt it and form an ocean. And that's not so fantastic. It's possible to dream about things like that. It is also possible to dream that should we reshape the Martian landscape, we would be settling an old account. Perhaps they did as much for us once. If we, on the other hand, are unique in the universe, the time is approaching when we can spread our kind to the stars. Albert Einstein believed the universe was shaped like a saddle. By traveling in a straight line, one could eventually wind up where he started. With the universe, as with life, endings seem to merge with beginnings. Was the end of some undiscovered civilization on Mars the beginning of our civilization on Earth? Will our first steps on some dusky Martian plain be a homecoming? Only when we've been there can we prove or dismiss the notion that some calamity of nature or poverty of spirit might have overtaken a parent civilization on the fourth planet from the sun. It would be well for us to find out, for it has been observed that those who cannot learn from the past are condemned to relive it.
Hope you enjoyed that. That's my first episode tonight here on The Witching Hour. I'm your host, Wolfman Dan. And hey, do me a favor, my fuck. If you drop a link in the chat, just drop a link for the channel. Don't drop no dirty links. Don't drop no links that take straight to shows, because that takes people out of the chat, and that's not real cool. So if you drop a link, be sure just to drop a channel link, please. So we're going to move on to the second episode tonight, In Search of UFOs. And I hope you're enjoying my In Search of Marathon.
In December 1978, a Melbourne, Australia television news crew filmed an object they claimed was a UFO. That film gave chilling credibility to an earlier report of an Australian pilot who disappeared after he radioed that he was being strafed by a UFO.
No, Sierra Juliet. Affirmative. It's not an aircraft. It's...
Are there UFOs in the skies over Australia and New Zealand?
Great.
been more than 110,000 recorded UFO sightings. Researchers estimate that that number reflects only a tenth of those actually seen. Eyewitnesses claim that in nearly all cases, the UFOs have a saucer-like shape. Despite repeated official government denials that UFOs exist, some people point to hard evidence of scorched areas on the Earth's surface where UFOs have supposedly landed. Believers claim that the scarred areas are caused by intense heat generated by the UFOs.
UFO sightings occur throughout the world, but the great majority of reports have been in the southern hemisphere, in the skies over New Zealand and Australia. It was here that the most astounding UFO footage in history was recorded.
On December 21st, 1978, radar poles near Wellington, New Zealand picked up what air traffic controllers called an unexplained blip. A local pilot, Vern Powell, was at the same time bound on a cargo mission from the South Island to the North Island of New Zealand. Powell described the object as anything but plane-like in nature. What was it that Captain Powell, a 35-year flying veteran, saw in that December night sky? Douglas Maben heads New Zealand's Mount John Observatory.
Well, at that time that was taken, there were two very bright objects in the sky. One early in the morning was the planet Venus, seen in the mornings fairly close to the horizon. And during the night, from a little bit before midnight through to the morning, the planet Jupiter was up in the sky, and it was very bright, though not as bright as Venus. So depending on the time of day or night when the photograph was taken, it could have been one of those two planets. People have been able to give us a fair enough description of the time and the position in the sky. They see these things. We're able to work it out, and every report I've had, we've had that sort of description. We've been able to identify it. The reports of these have been going on for so many years now, and if there's such an intelligent set of people about coming from outside the Earth that have been coming around all these times, I think by now they would have landed and introduced themselves.
Others weren't so sure. Quentin Fogarty, a reporter for an Australian television station, was in New Zealand at the time of Vern Powell's flight. His station requested him to do a story on Powell's experiences. Together with David Crockett, a New Zealand cameraman, Fogarty decided to retrace the flight path of Captain Powell. In Search Of has recreated what happened to Fogarty on that fateful flight. Fogarty planned to make the 400-mile round trip between Wellington and Christchurch in a massive Argosy aircraft, which was already scheduled for a freight run. Armed with cameras and sound equipment, the two men hoped to film proof of what Powell had reported. Fogarty realized that the chances of seeing what Powell saw 10 days earlier were remote, but he still had strange feelings about the flight.
There were stages there where I was very, very frightened. When I thought, well, if I was to die, or if in fact I was to be removed from that aircraft in some shape or form, then it wasn't going to be a painful process. And I can't really explain why I felt that. It's just a feeling I had.
The flight was long. Captain Bill Startup warily scanned the night sky. Fogarty and cameraman Crockett waited in the hold.
Testing 1, 2, 3. Just checking the intercom.
It may be a long night.
Suddenly, Captain Startup spotted the object and called to Fogarty.
Quick, off to starboard.
The object seemed to be hovering around the aircraft.
Do you see it?
Unable
unable to get good camera position, Fogarty and Crockett raced up to the cockpit. This is the film they shot.
And by the time David and myself got onto the flight deck, I could see two bright lights. And in retrospect, it now appears that this object was quite low, and in fact was reflecting on the water. We just kept looking at this one bright object that looked like a very bright star outside our starboard window. So we turned towards the object, and at this time, David was continuing to film. And at one stage, he said to me, he got very excited and turned around to me and said, you know, it's got a brightly lit bottom and a sort of transparent sphere on top. And I was doing a tape commentary at the time, and I remember saying that they sounded like a classic flying saucer shape. And I think it was the last person to see it. Was that I looked out the right-hand side of the aircraft and peered right down. And this object just went below the aircraft and disappeared. Nobody connected with this case has been prepared to say that they are extraterrestrial, because I don't think you can ever say anything is extraterrestrial until you can actually physically hold on to it or meet with the inhabitants, or the thing lands in Central Park and you beam it live television around the world, and then people would say it was hoaxed anyway. But there are a number of possibilities, and I think that probably the strongest of all the possibilities is that it is extraterrestrial.
The film is unlike any other recorded in history. The object darted about, changed color, shimmered with an eerie translucency. The object was incredibly bright, far brighter than any planet or star. The film, shot by Fogarty and Crockett, has since been analyzed by U.S. and Australian scientists. Their conclusions have been that it does show some metallic object, unearthly in its brightness. No one will hazard a guess as to what it was, or why it appeared where it did. By plotting where UFOs have reportedly appeared, a complicated grid system was devised by a man who has become the dean of UFO researchers. Bruce Cathey, a commercial pilot for more than 40 years, believes that his system, controlled by the elements of light, energy, and matter, validates the presence of UFOs.
I only found the system by actually studying UFOs, even of UFOs. And it was after I found out UFOs have to use that system or tune into that system if they're going to move from point to point in space. The UFO shots were taken in New Zealand around last Christmas. Everything points to the fact that they were definitely, it was hardware in the sky. And the main reason I say this is the fact that it's not the first time. It was a bit of a joke to us at the time when there was such a furor made about this publicly worldwide, as if it was one case. Well, it's not saying. There's been many, many cases similar to this in New Zealand in the same area. There's been material tracked around the Cook Strait area and up around that area on many occasions by radar at Wellington, and on many occasions, even in daylight, there's been an object seen in the sky by crews in an aircraft, and that's also been sighted on radar. And in one of those particular cases, the radar crew asked the crew of the aircraft to vector themselves onto this object so that they could get a close look at it. The crew were watching this from a distance, and they refused. And that object was in that area for so long that even on the second trip back from Wellington across the Straits again, it was still there. The crew saw it a second time. But that was a broad daylight case. So, and nowhere could they say there was lights at night being reflected or a Venus or anything like this. This is, but there have been many cases like this, and particularly in that area.
This UFO film shot over New Zealand might bear a strange relationship to an event which occurred 3 months earlier. In Search Of examines that event next. October 21st, 1978. 20-year-old Frederick Valentic took off to fly 120 miles from Melbourne, Australia, across the Bass Strait to King Island. Valentic was scheduled to pick up some fish for a small market that employed him. Despite his youth, he was experienced enough to be a flight instructor, and Frederick Valentic had flown this route many times before.
Sierra Juliet. Pilot to ground. Is there any known aircraft in my vicinity below 5,000 feet?
Delta Sierra Juliet. Negative. No known traffic.
Delta Sierra Juliet. There seems to be a large aircraft below 5,000 feet.
Delta Sierra Juliet. What type of aircraft?
I cannot confirm, but it's four bright lights that appear to be landing lights. Unknown aircraft that just passed over me, about 1,000 feet.
Is large aircraft confirmed?
Delta Sierra Juliet, affirmative at the speed it's traveling. Are there any RAAF aircraft in the vicinity?
Negative. Confirm you can't identify aircraft.
Affirmative. Delta Sierra Juliet, Melbourne. It's approaching from due east of me. It seems to be playing some sort of game, flying at a speed I can't estimate.
Stephen Roby, air traffic controller on duty then, explains the reported UFO's movement.
Times and coming from various directions. And then he started orbiting, and the aircraft was orbiting above him. And on several occasions, he sort of stated that towards the end it wasn't an aircraft, and he described it as having a sort of a green light on it, and also it appeared to be a sort of a silver metallic colour.
Delta Sierra Juliet. What is your altitude?
Delta Sierra Juliet, 4,500 feet.
The maroon eyebrows.
Delta Sierra Juliet. Confirm you can't identify aircraft.
Affirmative. It's not an aircraft, it's...
We expect
Guido Valentic is Frederick's father.
night. He's supposed to join us with friends where we went for some movie, family movie projection. And that night he never turned up. He didn't ring up. Normally, he's always when he go for a trip. When he return at the airport, he normally would have called us. You know, I'll be home after an hour or so. But that night, it was quite strange, you know. We didn't know anything about it. We got home about 11 o'clock and he wasn't home. My wife then started to worry about it. And so, you know, I said, oh, this is too late to start inquiry.
Can you describe it? Delta Sierra Juliet. It's flying past. It has a long shape. Cannot identify more than that. Coming for me right now.
He described it as being of a long shape, as I said before, a silver colour with the various lights on it. And he actually did say it wasn't an aircraft. So it's very strange.
It appears to be stationary. I'm orbiting. The thing, it's orbiting on top of me. There's a green light and a sort of metallic light on the outside. Seems to have vanished now.
Confirm it has vanished.
Affirmative. Do you know what sort of aircraft I've got? Is it military?
No military traffic in this area.
It was 8 o'clock, 8:30 in the morning. Nothing still happening. I couldn't see any sign of him, and I was just about to get up and maybe get on the phone, where all of a sudden a couple of uniformed blue slack-legged walk in the front door, and at that time we realized immediately that something was wrong.
Delta Sierra Juliet. Engine is rough idling and coughing.
Delta Sierra Juliet. What are your intentions?
Proceeding King Island. Delta Sierra Juliet. Unknown aircraft now hovering on top of me.
Finally, we lost contact with him in a very strange way. The communications he was putting out seemed to break. People describe it as a sort of a metallic sound, the last transmission that was sent from Delta Sierra Juliet.
Delta Sierra Juliet.
Acknowledge. Do you read me? Do you read me? Delta Sierra Juliet. Repeat. Do you read me? Despite an extensive 4-day search, which included using a sophisticated Orion aircraft capable of detecting any sort of debris at great ocean depths, not a single scrap of wreckage was ever found. No hard evidence ever turned up that would explain the disappearance of Frederick Valentic. But theories abound. Some say that Valentic became disoriented and saw this lighthouse. A second theory is that he saw lights of fishing vessels and then, becoming disoriented, spiraled his plane into the ocean. Guido Valentic, Frederick's father, believes otherwise.
Well, after Frederick reported this UFO incident, I inclined to think that it could be some intelligent life in the outer space, despite all the officials are trying to suppress this. Really makes me very confused, because knowing Frederick what he radiated and knowing my son wouldn't make himself so ridiculous in stating things like that. So I'm inclined to believe that really must be something in the space that general population may not aware to be. And I realized after his disappearance, which I couldn't have the opportunity before, how many calls I get from various parts of the world. And they really encouraged me to believe that he could be still alive. I've been with another intelligence in the space.
One of the most bizarre attempts to prove Valentic still lives is conducted by New Zealand psychic Colin Amory. He claims that through the power of a seance, he can contact Valentic and speak in his voice.
I know that my family are very sad, but it is not necessary. Death is something that is quite painless and is not difficult to bear.
Valentic's plane and the supposed UFO were beyond the reach of radar, thus making it impossible to confirm his report. And the taped conversation between Valentic and the air traffic controller has never been released. The Australian Civil Aviation Department has refused all requests to hear that tape. The department will not give any reason for its refusal.
Wally actually came. Wow, I'm impressed.
Acknowledge. Do you read me? Repeat. Do you read me? There have been hundreds of planes that have disappeared without a trace. Valentic's disappearance is the single documented case where a plane has vanished after claiming contact with a UFO. For years, In Search of cameras have found and recorded the reports of individuals claiming to have seen UFOs.
And there was this weird object, funny noises, and it was really bright.
When I first saw it, I was standing approximately right here, but I couldn't get too good of a view of it because the brush and the trees are in the way.
I don't know how many people saw it and told us the next day that they saw this thing up in the sky.
I noticed up by the blue shed over there that there was something in the sky. It was definitely right there.
On the night of November 2nd, 1975, I was sitting here doing my homework, and I looked out the window, and right above the blue building I saw a UFO come down out of the sky.
All of these first-hand accounts, together with the strange occurrences in the southern hemisphere, only makes one wonder, what really does exist in outer space?
I want to thank Wally and my flock for joining me tonight. It makes me feel good that somebody actually came to watch my little In Search of show. That's right. I'm doing a In Search of marathon as I pull a Dr. Wu and see just how belligerently messed up I can get doing a live stream. Maybe if you join me Saturday night at 1 a.m., you'll see me even worse off than I am now. I may even show a video
Not to hold it inside.
by my guy,
Conquered itself because it can't be done, I don't think.
Dr. Wu.
A family in Utah claims they were abducted from the safety of their home and held prisoner on board a UFO. Other people have also reported being captured by extraterrestrials. A man in Wyoming claims that while he was hunting, he came face to face with alien beings and was forcibly taken on board their spacecraft. Many people insist they have been kidnapped by aliens and imprisoned on board UFOs. The phenomenon is called a close encounter of the fourth kind.
This series presents information based in part on theory and conjecture. The producer's purpose is to suggest some possible explanation, but not necessarily the only ones, to the mysteries we will examine.
500 billion stars in our galaxy alone, each a seething universe spitting fire and light. Only recently have the powerful eyes of radio telescopes given mankind a glimpse of the infinity of space. Astronomers maintain that if intelligent life exists on distant worlds, the likelihood of it crossing the endless chasm of time and space is next to impossible. Yet, 50,000 UFO sightings are reported each year. Some are backed by what is purported to be concrete evidence, like the suspended image of a UFO captured by an Arizona cameraman in 1966. The television cameraman isn't the only person who's convinced that he has proof that UFOs are visiting the Earth. What's even more startling are the first-hand accounts of people who insist that they've been abducted by extraterrestrials. These people claim to have been held as prisoners on board spacecraft, examined by aliens, and then released. What makes their testimony difficult to dismiss is that it comes from average Americans. Carl Higdon is the foreman of an oil rig in Rawlins, Wyoming. He's been at the same job for 15 years, working 6 days a week to support a family of 7. His crew refers to him as the Wyoming Coyote because of his feisty determination to get the job done against all odds. looks forward to those days he can retreat into the forest. However, one October morning in 1974 was to be different from all other days. Carl recreates the events as he remembers them.
I went to pick up my crew to go to work, and one of them was sick, so we couldn't work. So I came back to the house and decided I'd go hunting. So I decided to go on down into the forest, and I hunted down there until, it must have been around 4 o'clock. So I walked down over this hill. Whenever I got over the hill, I seen these 5 elk standing down there. One of them was a big bull, so I raised my gun to shoot.
Then, something happened beyond his range of experience. Carl blacked out. When he regained consciousness, he was aware that an undetermined period of time had elapsed and that he had lost touch with reality. He stumbled through the forest in a dazed condition, trying desperately to figure out where he was and how he could get help. By 8 in the evening, Marjorie Higdon became alarmed when her husband hadn't returned. She called for a search party.
Hello, Marilyn? Yes, this is Margie. Carl's not in from hunting yet, and I was wondering if you guys could take me out and look for him. Yeah, I know, but he's not in yet. Yeah, but I don't have a 4-wheel drive. Uh-huh. Well, I don't know. I just feel like I ought to go look for him.
Carl's friends discovered him in a semi-conscious state. They were disturbed by his incoherent ramblings.
What happened? You don't know. Seems strange. Sure you all right? Yeah. You're not hurting anywhere? No. Okay. Get you out of here and get you to the doctor as soon as we can.
This guy got the anal
Carl was
probe.
rushed to the emergency ward of the Carbon County Hospital, where he had trouble seeing, hearing, and speaking. Nurse Ella Peterson attended him for 3 days. During that time, he remained mainly in an amnesiac state, unable to recall his own name or recognize his wife. After the incident, life in Rawlins changed for Carl. He was too disoriented to work or function normally. In desperation, he contacted the UFO agency, APRO, who sent Dr. Leo Sprinkle to investigate.
Dr.
I serve
Sprinkle.
as a consultant in psychology, and my primary interest is working with those people who claim to not only see flying saucers, but also claim to have had some kind of abduction experience or some kind of contact, face-to-face contact with alien beings who are associated with the UFOs. I myself have investigated 23 persons using hypnotic techniques to assist them to recall the experience.
Okay, let yourself relax deeply and go right back to that same deep concentration, that same deep relaxation. Let the muscles relax. Let yourself know that you can breathe deeply and easily as you look at the spot.
Sometimes these people have a loss of time experience, an amnesic period, which occurs during the UFO sighting. Then later they check their watches and find out that they have lost some time, which they cannot account for. And these cases are most exciting and interesting because it suggests the possibility that the persons have been taken on board, have been examined, and then released, and have been told that they will not remember what has happened.
Fire. Bullet don't look right.
He got the anal probe.
He wants me to go with him. Lights are bright. Lights are... Can't keep my eyes open. Can't see. They look like me. Same features. He said the sun burns him. He's gonna take me back. Just let yourself go back inside the cubicle. What happens inside the cubicle? Oh. Can't get in, there ain't no door. You know how you get in? No. We're above the trees. I can see pretty good. The ball looks like a basketball. But it's got a two gray outline.
He got the anal probe.
Kind of dark. No lights. There's the lights again. We're back.
In the investigation of a case, Dr. Sprinkle attempts to establish an abductee's credibility. He closely questioned Nurse Peterson to determine Carl's condition immediately following the incident.
He kept his eyes closed most of the time, saying that they hurt.
Dr. Sprinkle.
And other than that, why, he had no complaints of pain.
Read both arms for me. First attachment goes across your upper abdomen.
In order to corroborate the story, he arranged for a polygraph exam to be administered.
Regarding whether or not you actually had that UFO experience in question, you intend to answer truthfully each question to that? Yes. Did you ride in that spacecraft you described to me? Yes. In my own personal opinion, I find with the cases I've investigated that there seems to be no evidence of hoax. There seems to be no evidence of a psychotic reaction which has caused the individual to falsely believe that he or she has had an abduction, so that I'm left with the mysterious and sometimes uncomfortable feeling that the cases are happening as the individuals described. That is, that they are being taken on board, examined, and released by intelligent beings who, for their own reasons, are engaging in these experiences.
Carl managed to work through a traumatic incident that he had been unable to live with. With the help of Dr. Sprinkle, he no longer was haunted by nightmares. He no longer doubted his own sanity. The abduction experience was resolved to his own satisfaction, and Carl resumed his work with a new vigor.
Don't make a hill of beans to me whether anybody believes it or not. I know what happened to me. If people want to take it at face value, that's fine. If they don't, it don't make any difference. The only thing, if this does happen to anybody else, what they ought to do is talk to somebody about it. Not to hold it inside and try to conquer it themselves, because it can't be done, I don't think. I don't think our mind can take it. As far as the experience happening to me, I think if it hadn't been for Dr. Sprinkle, I probably would have been in an institution by now.
Carl's is not the only abduction case. There are others who claim to have been of Salt Lake City are the center of steel production in the West.
My name is Pat Roach, and I work at the steel company in Orem. I'm a millwright apprentice. I should be a journeyman another year or two.
Pat is one of 5,000 employees at the steelworks. When she completes her training as a millwright apprentice, she will be the only woman licensed to make repairs on the heavy machinery. When the work whistle blows, Pat hurries home to her number one responsibility. She is the sole support of 5 young children. On October 16th, 1973, the normal flow of her life was dramatically altered. Pat recreates the events for In Search Of.
It was about 8 o'clock in the evening. My little boy was 4 at the time. He climbed up beside me, and he had his blanket with him, and we fell asleep.
Sometime between 8 and midnight, something invaded the privacy of Pat's home. Her children, normally alert to strange sounds in the night, slept on, as if put in a deep trance. They would later believe that they were abducted during their sleep.
Damn, man.
Only one child reported seeing something too strange to believe. Police Sergeant Ray Edwards answered Pat's call for help. He investigated the area, but could find no evidence of an attempted break-in. The following morning, Edwards filed an official report, leaving the case open. He dismissed the claim of Pat's 6-year-old Deborah, who insisted the house had been invaded by spacemen. Nevertheless, for the Roach family, an unsettling mystery still hung over their household and was to persist for the next 2 years. UFO investigators believe victims suppress the memory of an abduction because they are programmed to do so. Researchers feel, however, that children stand a better chance than adults of resisting mind manipulation.
I wouldn't have actually known what happened that night. I probably wouldn't have even investigated it at all if it hadn't been for the fact that 2 of my children were just positive that they were spacemen. I began reading about UFOs, and I began looking at magazines that had stories about UFOs and seeing other people's experiences. And I thought, there must be more to it than what we know. And so I thought, well, the only way we'll find out any more is to go under hypnotism.
Tell me more about the time.
In order to recall the events, Pat contacted Dr. Jim Harder of APRO, the Aerial Phenomenon Research Organization.
And I and 2 other members of APRO are in charge of the close encounter investigations. What I mean by that essentially are close encounters in which people have had intimate contact with what could only be called alien beings. I have talked with 30 or 40 people who've had such experiences. Now, in various degrees, I've been able to regress them through particular experiences.
Wow. Zero. Your whole body's feeling very heavy and relaxed, except that your left arm is beginning to
The hypnosis enabled Pat to retrieve memories that she had long buried.
I remember what the interior of the spaceship looked like. It seemed that the walls fell away as you went to the ceiling, and you could see the stars and everything. There was this TV scanner that would start at the top of my head and go all the way down and come back again. It was like an eye. I was examined by a man that was just an ordinary man. He was a little over 6 foot tall. So I was very upset because he came at me with a needle, a long needle, right here. I was angry with him because I didn't feel that they had any right to come into someone's home and take them. And what I was particularly upset with him about was that I didn't know where my children were. They know everything about us physically, how to make us well, and everything about how our body operates, but they can't understand our emotions and our feelings and our ideas about things. They don't understand us. I don't believe that they really want me to go on TV and tell my story because if it's happened to other people, they might start putting the pieces together and realize that they've had the same experience.
Powerful radio telescopes point to the heavens, listening to the noise of the universe. Astronomers committed to the concept that it is impossible for extraterrestrial life to come to Earth believe that if contact is made, it will come through a radio signal across the infinite expanse of space. But there are others, ordinary men and women, who insist that intimate contact has already been made.
That's right, you're watching the In Search of Marathon. I'm your host, Wolfman Dan, the Daddy Dan blog, Danny Staten. I hope you're enjoying this. We're taking a look at some In Search of episodes based on UFOs, aliens, space, and of course time. And this is one of my favorites.
In 1895, H.G. Wells published a fantastic novel about time travel. He entitled it The Time Machine. The book ushered in a fanciful era of imaginary trips to awe-inspiring events of history. 79 AD, the eruption of Mount Vesuvius. 26 AD, the resurrection of Christ. 15 billion BC, the very creation of the universe. Today, science is reshaping our concept of the cosmos. Are we at last ready to journey to the stars and conquer the barriers of time and space travel?
producer's purpose is to suggest some possible explanation, but not necessarily the only ones, to the mysteries we will examine.
We are witness to the last leg of a hypothetical journey to the stars and back again. Our crew has been traveling through the galaxy very near the speed of light. They have finally returned to Earth. Due to an effect called time dilation, first described by Albert Einstein, hundreds of years have passed on Earth, while only a few years have passed in the spaceship. Once they have landed, what will the crew find when they open the portal of their ship?
This is how Planet of the Apes started.
Will Earth have reached undreamed heights of technology, or seared itself back into Stone Age emptiness? It is easy to conceive of the astronauts' journey through space. It is harder to comprehend their travel through time. How far-fetched is the idea of actually traveling through time? Today, we accept the concept of distant space travel because we have journeyed to the moon and back. Now, scientists are preparing for a world where both time and space travel are inseparably linked.
Status check. Command on in, Colonel.
Affirmative. One expert on the subject of time and space is William Kaufman, author, lecturer, and adjunct professor in the Department of Physics at San Diego State University.
We all live in space and time. We're all familiar with the three dimensions of space, forward and back, left and right, up and down. And time is what clocks measure. As the clock ticks on, it's measuring time. And of course, as we go from the cradle to the grave, you're also moving through time. It's kind of like looking up at the stars. When you look up at the stars during the night, you see stars scattered across the sky. If you think about what you're seeing, if you look at a star that's 10 light years away, you're really seeing how that star looked 10 years ago because it took the light 10 years to get to you. And therefore, to me, one of the great lessons of the nighttime sky is that as we are looking out into space, we're also looking backwards in time. That we must incorporate time on an equal footing with our three dimensions of space and talk about something that we call space-time, one of the things that was given to us by Albert Einstein.
Albert Einstein changed all conventional thinking in physics when he published his famous theory of relativity in 1905.
E is equal mc square, in which energy is H equal to mass multiplied with the square of the velocity of light, showed that very small amount of mass may be converted into a very large amount of energy.
Albert Einstein approached all of reality with a deep personal conviction, almost a religious belief, that if we're doing anything right in science, if we're discovering anything of any real value, then the way we write down our discoveries, the way we write down our equations, should not depend on things like the color of your skin or your religion or how fast you happen to be moving, whether you're sitting here on the Earth or zooming through the solar system at 3/4 the speed of light. And all Einstein did in 1905 was take everything we knew about electricity and magnetism and rewrite it in a form such that it would be the same for everyone. For an example, suppose you have a rocket ship moving through the solar system at 3/4 of the speed of light. In order for you on Earth and your colleague in that spaceship to have a complete, coherent, rational understanding of how things work, you have to say his rulers are shrinking. You have to say that the very mass of his spaceship is behaving as though it's much more massive than it normally is. You have to say his clocks are ticking more slowly than normal. Not only do the clocks tick more slowly, but every process proceeds more slowly. like the rate at which a man's beard grows, or the rate at which your heart beats, or even the rate at which you age. One of the results of all of this is that you can't travel faster than the speed of light. And the reason why this is so is if you think about moving out in a rocket ship, say a rocket ship even with an infinite supply of fuel, as that rocket ship goes faster and faster and faster, its clocks slow down. And as a result, it burns that fuel more and more slowly. And the slowing down of time is so powerful that at the speed of light, clocks stop, time stops. And as a result, you never are able to burn that final drop of fuel, that final precious drop of fuel that would put you over the speed of light. While Albert Einstein was exploring many of the hypothetical and mathematical aspects of space and time, people in the United States and in Germany were actually building machines to take us up off of the surface of the Earth.
Early experiments in rocketry appear almost comic compared to today's accomplishments in space. But improvements in rocket design came rapidly, especially in America under Robert Goddard, and in Germany with the work of Werner von Braun. By 1932, von Braun had taken charge of Germany's rocket program and had begun the tests that would lead to the infamous V-2 missiles. During World War II, Adolf Hitler used the V-2 rocket as a weapon of terror against the civilian population of London.
For better or for worse, rockets have always had a military application. But underlying all of this, in the minds of everyone who works on these projects, is the vision of using these machines to take us beyond the confines of our own planet, to explore the moon. We've walked on the lunar surface, to use reusable rocket ships like the space shuttle, to make many trips, to make use of the full potential of what actually exists out there in space. And you know, perhaps not us, but our children may very well be able to book flights to space stations or to the moon and beyond.
One group that hopes to be among the first to utilize the space shuttle when it opens up to civilians calls itself Oasis. They gather together on weekends to share food and their enthusiasm for space travel.
I'm Charlie Carr. I'm with the California Museum of Science and Industries. This group is doing something that's really unique. It's getting together a lot of people from different backgrounds, from technical fields, from social fields, people working in the community, all different sorts of people. And they're all thinking and talking about space. They're talking about what's going to happen in the future, talking about what's going to happen personally to their lives as more people on Earth move out into space.
A frequent lecturer to the group is Dr. B.J. Bluth, sociologist and expert on long-duration space flight.
The work that I do really focuses in on how people can live in space, how they can get along together, what kinds of general problems, stresses, factors make it easier and harder for them to have a viable, successful mission. The human is going to have certain kinds of problems when it goes to space. There are stresses, there are physiological problems, there are fears, there are incidents that occur, there's the interpersonal relationship, there's being holed up all alone, no place to go, no way to get away. If you can imagine yourself being in a camper with no privacy curtains, with another person for 6 months and no place to go and you can't walk out of the camper, what kinds of things happen in that kind of situation? We have a very human problem in going to space. The technology is only one aspect. And if the human part of this space travel isn't as carefully solved as the technology problem, all of the technology in the world isn't going to make it possible to do what we want to do.
Obviously, there are a lot of technical problems with space travel. It's a difficult business getting someone there and back, healthy and sane during the process. But there's another whole aspect to this business. Because sitting around in the scientific journals for the past 15 or 20 years now have been things like time machines and time tunnels wormholes in space, highly warped regions of space where you could go in someplace in our universe and come out in another universe, or go in one of these holes and come out back in our own universe at a different time, 1 billion years ago or 1 billion years in the future. And these are some of the most fantastic hypothetical things that science has ever given us.
In our future explorations of the galaxy, will we one day make the discovery that will fulfill H.G. Wells' dream of time travel? Will we find the mechanism to travel backwards and forwards through time? I cannot convey the peculiar sensations of time traveling. There is a feeling of helpless, headlong motion. As I put on pace, night followed day like the flapping of a black wing. So wrote H.G. Wells in 1895 in his incredible novel, The Time Machine. Wells described a machine of brass, ebony, ivory, and translucent glimmering quartz. It was designed to take man on a journey through time. Wells clearly understood the implication of traveling backwards and forwards through the centuries and depicted it as a wonderful adventure.
Greetings, North Alabama Cryptic. I'm way too fucked up to talk. Tell me about it, dude.
In an effort to accurately predict the future, H.G. Wells strove to utilize the latest scientific theories of his day. A strong proponent of the theory of evolution, Wells suggested that the environment of industrialized England would cause the factory workers to evolve into what he called Morlocks. Morlocks were pale, pink-eyed, carnivorous creatures who inhabited underground caverns of complex machinery. Wells saw a different fate for those who lived the life of leisure in society. After thousands of years of living without need or conflict, Wells proposed that they would evolve into what he called the Eloi. The Eloi were childlike creatures of limited intelligence who would frolic and gather fruit on the surface of the earth. Today, the evolutionary prophecies of H.G. Wells seem to many unlikely. But is it possible that someday science may actually build a time machine?
Having a time machine is a very attractive idea. We all have things we'd like to go back and change about our lives or maybe affect history somehow. But scientists have trouble with time machines. There are a lot of illogical inconsistencies that develop. For example, if you had a time machine that could take you back 1 billion years in the past, well, then you should certainly have no difficulty going 5 minutes back into the past. And if you could go back 5 minutes, you could meet yourself and tell yourself, literally, what kind of a nice trip you had. And then both of you could do the same thing. And then all 4 of you could do it. And then all 8 of you could do it. In other words, there's an inherent inconsistency that suddenly comes up. If you could travel back into the past, then reality must be irrational. There must be a very irrational part to how how the universe works. And we don't see this going on around us. And for this reason, when scientists find time machines popping up in their calculations, a lot of flags go up and they begin suspecting that they've done something wrong.
If there is any chance of a time travel mechanism existing, it will probably be found in distant space. Some scientists believe that when a giant red star explodes, the remaining core may collapse down to an incredibly dense ball of matter called a black hole. The gravitational field around a black hole is so intense that not even light can escape it.
The full description of how black holes work also include white holes. The full description actually is a set of black holes and white holes back to back. What's a black hole for one universe where things fall in is a white hole in the next universe where stuff gushes out. But the interesting thing in all of these pictures where you have a black hole, white hole situation is that if you take into account the effects of rotation on the black hole, the entire structure inside the black hole change. In particular, one of the things to come out of this, theoretically, is that you could possibly use this black hole as a portal, as a time tunnel from our universe to some future universe, or perhaps even some past universe.
Such a journey into a black hole would be fraught with dangers.
Me too.
You can go through that wormhole in space and time, then you can travel very, very near the center of the hole. You can travel very near where the matter of the star collapsed down to, where you have this tremendous curvature, this high warping of space and time. And there are problems with that. For example, if you could travel very near that place where you have infinite space-time warping, according to Einstein's famous equation E equals mc squared, the energy in the gravitational field of the hole produces a lot of matter that fills up the wormhole and chokes off any possibility of space travel to future universes. And this is one of the ways in which we think nature prohibits time machines. Nature takes care of things and makes sure that things won't come out too irrational by having a time machine. It chokes off the possibility of getting through the wormhole.
Perhaps the tunnel through a black hole will forever remain blocked, but the possibility always remains that someday someone will make a discovery which will allow us to visit Earth's distant past or glittering future. Carol Amato has a background in social science and is a member of OASIS. She has a special plan for accomplishing her goal of space travel.
I use the computer in my work, and I'm hoping that by doing so, this will provide a career path for me to get into space. My children I'm trying to prepare just by being adaptive to new situations. Tracy has a tremendous interest in growing things, plants and baby animals. I'm hoping she'll take this interest into space because it's going to be necessary to want to nurture things in order to make the environment be a psychologically pleasing one and to recreate something of the Earth. Damon's a very active boy. I hope he can utilize that energy that he has in some constructive way. Maybe he can go into space and become one of the pioneers.
With the successful flight of the space shuttle and the likelihood of civilian space travel on the horizon, it is not difficult to imagine families like Carol Amato's someday traveling into space. Perhaps one day, a boy Damon's age will solve the mystery of what lies on the other side of a black hole or at the place beyond the stars. What are the limitations of the galaxy? Will we ever travel faster than the speed of light, or backward and forward through time?
Oh, God.
I don't think that any scientist would categorically say, no, we will never travel faster than the speed of light. No, we'll never have time travel. But if we ever do, then this would have to come from a whole new view of science, a new super science, whereby we understand today's limitations as one separate little case. In other words, the kind of science that would give us travel into the past or travel faster than the speed of light would be as advanced over us today as we are over Neanderthal man.
Well, I hope you're enjoying my marathon of In Search of shows from the 1970s. Most of these come out in 1976 and 1977. That's like almost 50 years ago. So you got to think the people you're seeing are either dead or grandparents now. I guess it's time to kick it off with the main event. The one you've been waiting on. UFO cover-up.
This is the clearest film ever shot of a real unidentified flying object. 68,000 UFO reports have been filed in this country alone. Skeptics, however, pose an important question. If flying saucers are so common, why haven't we captured one? In a remote New Mexico desert, researchers have discovered a startling answer to that question. Persistent rumor holds that the United States government has recovered and is concealing fragments of alien spacecraft. Fragments and more.
It's time for a drink. Woo!
Based in part on theory and conjecture. The producer's purpose is to suggest some possible explanations, but not necessarily the only ones, to the mysteries we will examine.
Charges of a UFO cover-up began almost with the first famous flying saucer sightings in late June 1947. It's curious. These reports seem to center around areas where atom bombs and rockets were tested. Were alien forces keeping watch on the new weapons we savages had invented? The flying discs became the Pentagon's nightmare. Seemingly, our fastest jets could never come close to their incredible speeds and right-angle turns. UFOs were said to be able to shut down guided missiles by remote control. The Air Force organized Project Blue Book to officially investigate UFOs. Since its termination in 1969, Blue Book has been alternately praised and damned.
Well, the Air Force position is that we investigated UFOs for 22 years, over 12,000 sightings.
Colonel Don Burgrave, U.S. Air Force.
About 95% of all the UFOs were explainable. They were weather phenomenon, they were balloons, they were airplanes, they were lightning. And we concluded as a result of our investigations, which was carried out very scientifically, that one, there was no threat to the security of the United States, and there was no evidence that we could ever locate that an extraterrestrial vehicle had landed here.
New York lawyer Peter Gersten sued the CIA and FBI to release 5,000 UFO-related documents.
The reading of all the documents reveals that UFOs have the ability to render inoperable present-day technology. UFOs have the ability to gain access to our most sensitive military installations, unrestricted and unlimited access to nuclear installations. There's no doubt about it in my mind that there's a government UFO cover-up.
Ray Fowler, civilian UFO researcher for 17 years.
I've talked to military people who have told me about government cover-ups, how they've been instructed to say this and to say that. And I work for the United States Air Force Security Service myself, and which works for the National
National Security Agency, and I'm very familiar with intelligence operations and cover stories and things like that. So there's no doubt in my mind that there is a cover-up.
If there was a planned cover-up, then they were very successful in keeping it from me.
Colonel Robert Friend, former head of Project Blue Book, now an engineer on the space shuttle.
A lot of these organizations decided that there was a cover-up because the Air Force didn't pursue these sightings to what they considered the ultimate conclusion.
If there has been a UFO cover-up, it began in Roswell, New Mexico. Near White Sands and Alamogordo, Roswell was home base for many early tests of atom bombs and guided missiles. Here, also, the practice of military stonewalling may have been perpetrated. The case began when Roswell businessman Dan Wilmot witnessed an amazing object over the town. His son tells the story.
This was their home in July of 1947. It was one summer evening. They were sitting out here. Dad looked up in the west and saw an object that came down and had lights blinking, and it was rather frightening to him, but he said all of a sudden it seemed to rock a little bit and sort of counterbalance itself, wiggle a little bit, and then seemed to settle down and take off at a rapid rate of speed.
The next day, reporters heard that the Air Force had found fragments of the mystery object crashed on a remote ranch northwest of Roswell. Excitement ran high until officials announced it was only a weather balloon. Major Jesse Marcel, in charge of the operation, now tells a far different story.
They took pictures, of course. They had a whole flock of microphones there. They wanted me they wanted some comments from me, but I wasn't at liberty to do that. So all I could do is keep my mouth shut. And General Ramey is the one who discussed, told the newspapers, the newsmen, what it was, and to forget about it. It was nothing more than a weather observation balloon. Of course, which we both knew differently.
Major Marcel had to keep silent because of his strategic position at that time. He was in charge of all security and intelligence on atomic tests in the United States and the Pacific. Marcel retraced his secret recovery operation across the hot New Mexico desert.
We left Roswell perhaps around 3:30 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon. As you can see, it's flat. It is very difficult. In fact, with just verbal directions, we never would have found it. We had to follow the rancher out there.
The crash site was so remote, it took an entire day to drive there.
The following morning, we went out to the site where the crash was. And what I saw, I couldn't believe there was so much of it. It was scattered over such a vast area. So we proceeded to pick up as much of the debris as we could, loaded in a wagon. We filled that up. It took us a good part of the day to do that, because it was such small fragments that we had to do a lot of picking. We found a piece of metal about a foot and a half to 2 feet wide and about 2 or 3 feet long. Felt like you had nothing in your hands. It wasn't any thicker than the foil out of a pack of cigarettes. But the thing about that got me is that you couldn't even bend it. You couldn't dead it. Even with a sledgehammer would bounce off of it. So I knew that I had never seen anything like that before. And as of now, I don't know what it was.
There is new evidence that the FBI then got into the case with a different cover story. Lawyer Peter Gersten, searching through declassified government documents, came across a mention of the Roswell case.
One of those documents related to an incident in Roswell, New Mexico, which indicated that the object which had crashed was an experimental kite. The FBI investigated the incident and determined that it was terrestrial, that it was from an organization which had been doing research in experimental kites.
What did crash in this desert? A UFO? A weather balloon? A radar-reflecting kite?
It was not anything from this earth that I'm quite sure of. Because being an intelligence officer, I was familiar with just about all materials used in aircraft and our air travel. This is nothing like that. It could not have been. It could not have been.
To develop the first atomic bomb, the Manhattan Project was our first totally secret military operation. Secrecy has continued to this day as an instrument of foreign policy. Official fabrications have become a vital link in security. We never admitted such a spy plane as our U-2 existed, until the Russians managed to shoot one from their skies. We managed to capture an advanced enemy aircraft. Even fragments can reveal new information. Such captured material is routinely rushed to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Dayton, to the top secret Foreign Technology Division. This place is so classified that former Air Force General Senator Barry Goldwater was once denied entrance. For 30 years, rumors have spread about Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. According to the stories, the U.S. government is concealing under top security flying saucers from another world and alien bodies cryogenically suspended in huge freezers. Such rumors could be easily dismissed, except that UFO researchers have gathered information leaked from military sources, sources who claim to have seen the craft and the bodies. The stories and rumors all mention a mysterious Hangar 18 as the ultimate repository. In search of cameras were the first allowed to photograph inside this hangar. Is it possible that here in Hangar 18, highly secret activities once took place? What evidence of a cover-up might we hope to find? Wright-Patterson is one of the largest and most complex air bases in the world. In the Foreign Technology Division alone, hundreds of secret experiments have been undertaken. Continuing military security has made Hangar 18 a mysterious citadel. Some experts believe that new designs have been created here. Every branch of the military has experimented with flying wedges, flying wings, hovercraft, with an amazingly consistent lack of results. The flying saucer shape was an obsession of aeronautical pioneer Edmund Doak. These rare films show static and dynamic tests of his early models. Doak spent 30 years and $250,000 investigating the problems of circular airfoils. Ironically, just when he seemed on the verge of a breakthrough with his Doak 16 vertical takeoff plane, the Air Force canceled development on his projects. No reason was ever given. NASA tested the H-2F2 lifting body as a prototype for the space shuttle. As with all flying wedges, lack of stability was the single unsolvable problem. We are unable to confirm a single successful test of a manned flying saucer. Yet, the effort continues. Why? Does the government have some reason to pursue this quest? A reason they are keeping secret? From Wenham, a suburb of Boston, comes an eyewitness account which could explain this continued military fascination with flying saucers. Ray Fowler, one of the most respected civilian UFO investigators, is also author of 2 bestsellers in the field. Because of his stint in the Air Force Security Service, he finds himself still vulnerable to government pressure.
I work for a company that designed and built a major weapon system. And because of connections within the company, because of connections with Dr. Jalen Hynek, who was an Air Force investigator for many years, I came across information that indicated that this major weapon system, as well as others, had been disrupted by UFOs. And I gave a story to a national newspaper, the Christian Science Monitor, which published this story. Within an hour after this particular paper was out, the Strategic Air Command had called my company, and the following day the Pentagon called the company and threatened to send a letter of displeasure to the company if something wasn't done about my making these things public.
Because of similar pressures in his own work, a friend of Ray's had kept quiet for 27 years with an amazing story. Ray tried to convince the friend to tell his story on In Search Of.
I know it's been several days now, and I've been waiting for you to call me on this, but have you come to any conclusions?
The man finally agreed, for the first time, to talk, but only under strict conditions.
I can assure you that your name will not be used.
They made up a name, Fritz, to protect the witness's true identity.
Yay, Fritz.
I think the best place to do it probably would be in my planetarium away from the kids and the telephone and things like that.
Waiting for his friend to arrive, Ray nervously fiddled with his telescopes. He remembered his extensive investigations into the man's reliability as a witness.
The case of Fritz I started in 1973, went all the way back through the various companies he worked for, right back to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, talked to people he worked with, and they all gave him a very clean bill of health. A reputable man, honest man, not the type that would fabricate a hoax, and a very efficient engineer-manager.
As the man arrived, Ray recalled the years his friend had wavered about breaking an oath of secrecy. He recalled their long arguments about a greater public good. Would the years of patient persuasion at last pay off?
As I understand it, Fritz, you were working for the United States Air Force.
The story began late one night in 1953 at Frenchman's Flat, Nevada. The man had been working as a consultant on blast effects of atom bombs when he was suddenly ordered to report for a new mission.
What happened after that?
We were put on a bus, which the windows were all completely covered with curtains and, in some cases, black paper taped to the windows. And we're driven for 3 or 4 hours, and we're not sure just where we were going. Several of us tried to guess where we might have been. We, at that time, came to the conclusion it was in the area of Kingman, Arizona.
After getting off the bus, as recreated here, the scientists were taken to an even more remote location. They had no idea exactly where they were or what they were about to see.
We were told that we had been selected for various technical specialties. I was told that I was to ask any questions that had to do with dynamic loads and nothing more. I wouldn't get any answers to any other question. It looked like 2 saucers, I would call it, one on top of the other, inverted, probably 25 to 30 feet in diameter.
In terms of something known, what kind of metal would it look like?
Well, it would look like a brushed aluminum. I'm sure it probably wasn't that. I say that because I noticed no scratch marks. And anything that would penetrate into the sand 20 inches that way would certainly have some scratch marks.
No signs of buckling, fracture, or anything?
Not that I could see. I accepted it was probably some United States government vehicle, a highly classified vehicle. In fact, we were told that that's what it was. Interestingly enough, one of the questions I needed to know was what the mass of the vehicle was. Well, I can tell a lot of things from the penetration into the desert sand and so forth, but I needed to know the mass. And they told me that they weren't going to let me know that. They perhaps didn't even know themselves. There was also a tent, which I didn't get to look into, but one fellow whom I did happen to talk with briefly until they told us to stop talking, said that he had seen 2 bodies inside this tent, 2 alien-looking bodies. It was brown, leathery skin, had a silver, like a cap on, without a bill.
Like a skull cap?
Yes, like a skull cap. I realized what this really started to mean, but I also at the same time realized probably why the government was keeping it classified. There are a lot of things that could be changed by our culture or religions. There are a lot of things that could be affected by the release of information like that at that particular time.
Like many other UFO stories, this also concludes with the recovered craft taken to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. Cameras are normally prohibited there, but In Search Of was allowed to photograph certain declassified areas. We found their chambers inside the legendary Hangar 18.
The only knowledge I have of little green men, Martians, or whatever would be from the articles I've read of some of the published novels like Frank Scully's book and things like that.
Don Ritter, building's manager since 1942, claims the giant freezing cells were never used for storage of alien bodies.
Building 18 at Wright-Patterson was used primarily for cold soak engine testing, and we had 4 cells in this facility that we would take down to minus 65 degrees Fahrenheit, soak the engine for some period of time, and make the engine starts to test components, engines, and whatever for cold starts.
My major criticism is that from way back in the 1947s, there should have been a gradual information release and have the public accustomed to what UFOs are, what we're trying to do about them. And instead, they've covered up so long that to admit that they've covered it up, it's almost like another Watergate. Plus the fact, I think they don't have the answers. And if they admitted even what they knew, people would want to know more answers. They don't have the answers to give them. I'm sure they don't have the answers to give them.
Based on my own personal and professional experiences, for the last 26 years of wearing this blue suit. And most of that I've been in the public affairs business where I'm responsible for releasing information to the public. I can assure you on behalf of the Air Force that there's just no truth to that at all.
Inside the freezing chambers of Hangar 18, we've examined one small clue in the mystery of the UFO cover-up. Whether it proves fact or fiction, this search for flying saucers has already profoundly influenced our perception of our place in the universe. Colonel Robert Friend, former head of Project Blue Book.
I believe that speculation and the scientific approach to it can't live together. I would feel that there were, in lots of instances, cases that had potential scientific pay dirt that possibly should have been pursued further. And in that regard, yes, I think that some of the cases had a lot of promise.
The Roswell case and the strange story of the man known as Fritz are 2 dramatic examples of close encounters of the fourth kind. Like the 68,000 reports on record of UFO sightings, they exist in a limbo, halfway between science and speculation.